Is it time to buy Tyreek Hill? That and more this week on the couch, joined by close friend of the show, Pat Daughert. Pat, is it time? Is this it? When everybody's despair jumping out of windows, blood's in the streets?
The streets running red with Tyreek Hill, manager's blood. Yes, I think it is time. I hate that I'm saying it because the thing I was clinging to last week was kind of really outdated ancient history splits Tyreek Hill had with Skylar Thompson from 2022. I'm like, listen, man, Mike McDaniel, say what you will. I know he's going to be able to manufacture touches for Tyreek Hill. And then he couldn't do that at all in week 3. And it was really, really ominous and bad. And I saw someone say like Tyreek Hill basically had one good play this season, which is kind of true.
Yes.
It is true. But I just have to believe. I think Mike McDaniel didn't adjust well down the stretch the past 2 seasons. And I kind of hope, he's not getting like exposed, quote unquote, a little bit. But it's like, how could I feel like he's going to figure this out, whether it's Snoop Huntley, whether Skylar Thompson comes back from the dead, whether Tua comes back in a few weeks. I just feel like there's no way Mike McDaniel's not going to go down swinging, and swinging being in this case, like lots of manufactured Tyreek Hill touches. And I will buy him for pennies on the dollar right now.
Yeah. And we can talk, I guess, something practical here. Let's talk like 1-for-1 trades. Like, would you trade Brandon Ayuk for him?
Yeah, yes, because we always like to engage in psychoanalysis.
Yes, we are on the couch.
And my thing with Shanny is that and when the second he drafts you or the second he pays you, he treats you like a son who has to re-earn his love. And I feel like he's doing that with Brandon Ayuk. Like, I know he barely practiced this summer. I'm like, dude, I don't think it's this hard to get Brandon Ayuk the ball. And it almost seems like it's personal with Shanny. This is not good fantasy analysis, by the way.
It's
but
great
I would
fantasy analysis.
I'll still bet on the elite Tyreek Hill outcome over a wide receiver 11, wide receiver 12, best case outcome for Brandon Ayuk.
Right. It seems like, and of course, what we're thinking about is we're 3 weeks in. Pat, so much has happened. So, even just thinking back to last Thursday's game seems like ancient history, right? So much has happened. And I will say this. We were talking a little before we went on the air about things we've learned in our age. And I'm a little more aged than you are. But, one of the things that I feel like I've learned in my life, Pat, when we learned about natural selection and we learned about evolution, right? We thought of it as this process that takes millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years, right? That eventually the ape that stands up and becomes the human, right? But in my life, I feel like I've learned, no, humans, and this is probably our superpower, right? We're eminently adaptable. We're unbelievably adaptable. Look at what we've gotten used to just in our lifetimes. And it feels like even though the fantasy, evolution, we are all evolving into the thing that our lifestyle is making us. That's bad. That's why I've got hunched over shoulders, my low self-esteem and things like that. But my point is we are so malleable because even just 3 weeks into the season, Pat, things are so different than what we contemplated on so many levels. And we're just picking it up and going forward and trying to see what our next path is. And it's kind of small in the rearview mirror that Ayuk was like a 3rd round pick after he signed, and Tyreek Hill, again, a top 3, top 4, top 5 pick. And then you have the uncertainty, the diminished value with the quarterback. But these are the kinds of things that we're weighing out as we get used to these new realities. And week 3 gave us a whole new set of them that we're going to sift through. So I'll give you another 1-for-1. Like if someone said, Deontay Johnson, would you trade Deontay Johnson for Tyreek Hill?
I would trade Deontay Johnson for Tyreek Hill just because it's so impressive. So I always caution against worshiping the cult of the play caller. Dave Canales is great, but it's still about the players. But hard to ignore the fact that Sunday was Deontay Johnson's 81st career game and his first game with Dave Canales with a quote unquote real quarterback. And he immediately sets a new career high for receiving yards.
Right.
Very compelling data point. Getting me to worship at the altar of Dave Canales, but I'll just take the moonshot Tyreek Hill potential.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's still all about upside. And if Tua comes back in week 7, and this is, even though he's had some scary concussions in the past, it is a garden variety concussion. Getting in on Hill, getting in on Achane, getting in on Jalen Waddle. This is the time to do it. And I think it's reasonable to say, oh, geez, there's at least a 50-50 chance of that, and Tua staying mostly healthy for the rest of the year. And then you have Deontay Johnson. But what I love, and this is why he said this isn't good fantasy analysis, this is great fantasy analysis, because in each of the three cases we've talked about, Pat, you're talking about the play caller. And I know you and I have been doing this for a long time, like 20 years, right? You were kicking it around when
I've been longer than
this.
people would think.
Yeah.
No, 15 years. Excuse
15.
me. I was about to say
Okay.
13, 15. Yes.
15.
Yes.
Right. It's long enough that when we started doing this, Pat, play callers, not all at all in the vernacular of fantasy conversation.
No.
If you ask even the best fantasy analysts to name the 32 play callers, I mean, they might get half of them right, maybe. And just because you pick, the offensive coordinator, or the head coach, and their
Andy Reid was famous,
right?
Like that was about it.
Still,
Mike Shanahan was famous, but he was currently out of a job in 2009.
Right, and he was famous also for yanking our chain about like it's this running back. It's like it's just like we're seeing with some of the progenitors in the tree there. So absolutely though, if you're going to tell the story of any of these players, you have to tell the story of the play caller. And I think in general, Pat, I feel like there's more of an awakening in our fantasy world about just how interrelated players' values are and their fates, and how one event can change everything. And hopefully, again, I like to say this is every week, it's a reasonable time to make this speech about being resilient and carrying on. Right? It's like how wars are won, right? I mean, even in the worst of moments, keep making your waiver claims, keep setting your lineup, and those that persevere, fantasy football and the NFL and life will often reward that. So I think that I do think the Deontay Johnson thing. I mean, the reason to get out on Deontay Johnson right now, as a Steelers fan, I would tell you, is like eventually it will be something. It's Deontay Johnson.
He is one of those guys.
It will be something, but at the same time, I just did my projections, Pat, and he's in the top 5 for PPR this week. How's he not in the top
Denny
5?
Carter said the same thing. He's put him in like the top 5.
How can he not be? Right. If you're being honest, if you're doing projections, and what I mean by that is when you're projecting the statistics for the game, we know Cincinnati has one of the worst pass defenses in the league.
They do. They could not force a punt against a quarterback making his 3rd career start on Monday night.
Right. So it seems logical that Johnson, if he can stay on the field, is going to catch 8, 9, 10 balls in this game. And in PPR, that puts you in the top 5. When you're projecting that, we're not saying that's the upper end range of outcomes.
Yeah.
That's actually meaning it. So you mentioned Jayden Daniels. That's another one. Let's talk about Jayden Daniels, because was he the key to? Is this Lamar Jackson? The second year Patrick Mahomes. Was it the key to winning your league if you got Jayden Daniels as like quarterback 11?
I think so, and I'm I don't like to be a hot take guy or a victory lap guy, but one of my main summer talking points, one of the things I ended up saying like every podcast was, I just don't understand why Jayden Daniels is going as like the QB 11 or QB 12, while Anthony Richardson is going as the QB 4 and QB 5. Like either it should be one or the other. Like they should be in like the same tier or not the same tier. I did not understand the gulf between the two players, and I think we've gotten conditioned to the drafting public has gotten so hip to the importance of the dual threat that like these guys don't usually fall anymore, like to like the QB 1-2 borderline, or like in some leagues Jayden Daniels is probably like the QB 14 or whatever. Some leagues he's probably QB 9. Depends on like the player, the manager pool you're in. But like I was like, man, I thought guys with Jayden Daniels' skill set had like stopped falling outside like the top 10 or 12. But he just never pushed into the top 12. I mean, I guess kind of understandably so. It's the Commanders. It's Cliff Kingsbury. Speaking about the play call, he's old for a rookie. One of the things he was like memed for in the summer was like his highlight reel of taking huge hits at LSU.
Wile E. Coyote, yeah.
Yes, but I was like, man, I didn't think guys like this fell outside the top 12 anymore. So I have Jayden Daniels in like almost every league, and I am feeling I'm extremely smart and intelligent and wise right now.
Well, it's the Justin Fields meridian, right? Justin Fields was a terrible passer and a terrible offense with terrible play designs, terrible play caller. And, well, I mean, I shouldn't say that about Luke Getsy, but the point is he did all right for a game with the Raiders. But the point being that even Justin Fields, with nothing to help him as a passer, was, I think, quarterback 6 in the drafts.
It was crazy.
And he could win a week for you. and that was when quarterback scoring was even higher. Quarterback
Yes.
scoring is down. Every scoring, fantasy scoring period is down this year, but in general, over the last few years, scoring has been down. And you saw Justin Fields fit in when guys like Mahomes and Hurts and Allen were putting up their career years in terms of fantasy.
Point.
So, but then Justin Fields also like fell off the edge of the earth in terms of football for a little bit, and then resurfaced in Pittsburgh, and that maybe that gave people skepticism, because I looked at Daniels and thought, well, even if he's as bad of a passer as a rookie as Justin Fields, he's still better than quarterback 12, basically, like you're saying. And people probably won't make that mistake again. But when you're unpacking what we've seen, right? Because I mean, the Giants defense, well, let me make another point when I step back here, because I feel like what we're seeing so far this year, Pat, and some of it could be because the first 3 weeks of the preseason, some of it could be differences in coaching and organization, like how, because you always do the off-season stuff when you rank the 32.
Yes.
And the thing is, Pat, here's what I want you to do. It's don't even put it in tiers, okay? But do something like a score to show the differences, because 1 to 32 doesn't always show the gradation of differences. And I think what we're seeing on Sundays is like Deshaun Watson is where I was going to go with this. Deshaun Watson,
man,
and it's that bad, right? Like the Giants pass rush looks like the best pass rush against that line, still falling apart against Deshaun Watson, who's, just lost the edge and is not going to get it back. So we're seeing these outlier outcomes in games based on where the weak spots match up with the strengths in these matchups, and it's making people queasy. So we've seen this with Jayden Daniels. Okay. The first week they got blown out by Tampa, and he put up fantasy stats, but the game was over. So it was hard to get any kind of read on that. The Giants-Commanders game was a pretty well-played game, actually. I think the Giants would have won if their kicker had stayed healthy.
If they had a kicker, Sigmund.
Right? I mean,
it might have made a difference.
Right? It matters.
Kickers might have made a difference.
Kickers matter. And Jayden Daniels was good. I mean, he was very efficient, but it still felt like Cliff Kingsbury was not exactly inspired. And then we saw what we saw on Monday night, but and it was really electrifying, and I love it. I mean, as an optimist, as a positive person at heart, my blood type is B positive. I'm not making that up.
I don't know my blood type, which is probably
right. Everybody go check what your blood type is.
Very millennial of me, like, hey, who cares? I'm sure the guy in the ambulance could figure it out.
Right. There's some app on their phone or something.
Yeah, I've never had to figure anything out like this in my entire life. I'm sure this guy can do it.
But when Jayden Daniels really captured the NFL, the audience's imagination with that performance, or was it really just how bad Cincinnati's pass defense is? And Arizona's not exactly a murderer's row defense, but you think that Jayden Daniels is going to be really a special outlier as a rookie?
Well, first, how cool is it when like everyone gets to witness like a superstar arrival moment?
Yes,
like how rare that really is.
Yes,
and not the fact that not only did it happen in week 3, it happened in prime time was amazing. And my hope for Jayden Daniels, taking it back to the play callers, is that like they at least the Commanders the first 2 weeks, as you should be with a rookie, were understandably like very reticent, very cautious. Like they weren't opening up the playbook, they weren't really taking those down the field shots at all, which, Cliff Kingsbury has been criticized for forever, Mr. Horizontal Cliff.
Yeah.
And like, but it's understandable in the first 2 games of a guy's career, like don't put too much on his plate. But the fact that you hit some of those throws, even if it was a horrible defense, the fact that he hit them, that he's like expanded their minds to what could be possible with him. The McLaurin pass, it was so beautiful, but it almost like too beautiful. Or you don't want people to get over it. Like that pass was so hard to make. Like you don't want to be like, oh, he's going to be doing this every week now. But I just hope, my hope for that game is that it expanded Cliff Kingsbury's mind.
Right.
Like, no, listen, we actually can put this stuff on his plate. He actually can do this. Maybe there'll still be growing pains, of course, but like the kid is ready to open up the playbook, basically. And I'm a little scared that that's just not how Cliff Kingsbury or Dan Quinn is going to think. But that's my real hope coming away from that game, is that like they're like, all right, the kid is further along than we thought. Like we had high hopes. He impressed us in weeks 1 and 2, but we didn't know he already had this in the repertoire, but he does. And even if it's like reserved for good matchups, like making huge plays against bad defenses is a skill. Not everyone does it. So like the fact that even it was the Bengals, like the fact that he did it against anybody is amazing.
Yes.
Hopefully that's expanded their minds to what he can do.
this is already becoming one of my favorite couch episodes ever because we're talking about these things. We're psychoanalyzing the play callers now as a key part of no, but hey, this is you skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where the puck is. Wayne Gretzky,
Yes.
and how we start to project the next iteration is in some ways about human psychology, and I think first it always revolves around confidence. Cecil and I talk about this a lot. The player that always sticks in my head is Ryan Moats. Poor Ryan Moats, Louisiana
Oh my
Tech.
gosh. Not heard
But
the name in a while.
confidence is everything in the NFL. Confidence is everything. It is impossible to be successful without it. And often when we are just befuddled, we're wondering why this player that previously was good or in college was good or the situation was perfect and they're struggling. Well, oftentimes it's an injury that they don't disclose, but sometimes it's injury to the pride. It's confidence. And you're right to bring up confidence of a play caller. And I think we talked about this with the Justin Fields game last week too, Pat. You can look at the game that is called for a quarterback, and you can reverse engineer what the play caller thinks of that quarterback, but then you start stacking it week after week, and you're seeing the evolution of that. You're seeing how those things are changing. You're seeing how the play callers are responding to the data they're getting from watching the player execute the plays that they were calling up. And in Jayden Daniels' case, like you said, it is the opening of the petals of the flower. Because what did Jayden Daniels have as a calling card at LSU was his deep ball.
Yes.
And you have Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's smile was
I
one
know.
of the
I
most
hadn't seen him
genuine,
smile in like 4 years either.
the most
Like,
genuine smile. You want a signpost in fantasy football this year? I mean, of course, because the NFL ends up being, I say that it's the great American novel now, Pat. I don't know if you heard that, one of my
oh
hot
yes.
takes. It is truly like we don't have the great American novel being written at this point. I don't even know what the last great American novel was.
Well, they're out there, but the monoculture's dead, so there's no one promoting it.
Well, that's true too. So the NFL, because the NFL has everything. It has everything in terms of we talked about before we came on the show the tragic comedy of life, and it's all in there in the NFL. But then it ends up eventually resembling like a Russian novel from the 19th century, right? Like
There's
Dostoevsky or
always
Tolstoy.
so much tragedy and farce in the NFL.
In the end, it will always end up a tragedy. This is why I'm reminded, of course, Robert Griffin III looms over all this because it's so eerie how similar it was. And even the fact when they got Kingsbury as a play caller and they drafted Daniels and it was all set up, and I thought, well, this could be a case where they can get the drop on the NFL. I just hope that Daniels can stay healthy. But the most fascinating thing from a psychological point of view to look at from this situation, Pat, was it was in the preseason that in the freaking preseason, Daniels was like calling his own plays, doing his own thing, right? Go ahead.
He talk about confidence. Someone who exudes calm confidence. Yes. Getting a little deeper into our psychoanalysis. By the way, I have fewer data points to support this, but it's become a hobby horse of mine that Kyle Shanahan does not coach with confidence. And like, despite having all the scheme talent in the world, all the play calling talent in the world, I see it just he goes into milk it clock mode, don't lose the game mode faster than anyone in the NFL, when he would be so benefit. I mean, maybe he thinks it's untoward. Like, dude, you got to run up the score. Like, you needed to run up the score.
Do what worked. Yeah. Continue to do what worked. I'm looking up here at a Zulu coconut, and if you know Mardi Gras, you know how important a Zulu coconut is. That has painted on it 28-3. So that's Kyle Shanahan until he wins that Super Bowl. I mean, New Orleans, and that, by the way, that's New Orleans, Atlanta this week. Hope Atlanta, I know that you're all going to get some of that hurricane. Maybe you have already. Hope that everything's okay up there. And
I even find that's wreaking havoc on the baseball playoff race, by the way.
Oh, well, see, I was afraid that we were going to get, as I wear my Doc Ellis stuff today, I was afraid we were going to get diverted into baseball and forget that it was a football show. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that because it has been a scintillating, this last week of baseball is going to be great if the first couple of days are any indication. So Jayden Daniels, and you're right to point out that the key is the play calling. The key is that trust, and I think that's key for Terry McLaurin, and this is just really exciting. But Daniels has a different aura.
It's crazy.
He did not come in yes sir, no sir. Yes, he did not come in yes sir, no sir. It was his team, and it's a good thing that it's his team. And Justin Fields, I'll pivot to Justin Fields. and say again last week, looking at the play calling, Arthur Smith, and I love that the play callers are so central to these conversations because they are the puppet masters in a way. Their fingerprints are on everything, whether we realize it or not. But I think at one point last week, Justin Fields was 10 for 10. It was 10 for 10 for 58 yards, but it was 10 for 10, Pat.
Yeah.
And it's like doing a layup to get your shot on track. And then you saw him make a throw. And I think Tony Romo was calling the game, and Tony Romo made sure to accentuate this. It was a throw where Justin Fields had to process quickly, fit the ball in between two defenders. And then the thing about Justin Fields is when he just does a regular football thing, you see how much arm talent he has. You see how athletically gifted he is if he's just not sabotaging himself by holding onto the ball for too long or just not being aware of danger on the football field. So this is potentially really exciting. And I say this because Justin Fields was a player that we had as, again, a top 6, top 7 fantasy quarterback. And I still feel like the fantasy football community is skeptical that he's going to get back there.
They are. And which I think it just radiates more into art skepticism because we got burned so many times. But then you have to start unpacking that. Like, were we getting burned or was it Art Smith getting burned because of his quarterback play? But then I take that even deeper. Like, one of my theories in Atlanta was always Art telling the front office, like, no, I can win with Taylor Heineke. Like, I can win with these guys. And like insisting, almost preferring that kind of style of football. But so that one I've been having trouble unpacking. But it seemed like a better marriage than I think anyone could have thought possible so far. And not surprising, by the way. No, poor Russell Wilson. People love to give Russell Wilson extra time to heal. Like the Steelers, like, just take all the time you need, man. Every player in the league is getting rushed back from their injuries, except for Russell Wilson. Just take all the time you need, man. Like we want to get this right. And I don't even know where I'm going with this.
But. No, it's great. I mean, look, I don't want to dunk on Russell Wilson because Russell Wilson was one of the best quarterbacks of his era. You know,
he was a special player.
He's a special player, but Russell Wilson, the person, has now created such a deep association that you can't think about Russell Wilson, the football player, without thinking about Russell Wilson, the person. And boy, do we have so many lasting images. And again, I'm going to go mayor of Narrative Street here, Pat, when I say Steelers, the football gods work in mysterious ways because the Steelers, I think, had a new strength and conditioning coach. I think, don't quote me on that part, but they did something on the first day of camp where everyone's going to hit the sled. I don't care what position you are, you're going to hit the sled. And you might say that's some ridiculous old school football guy stuff, and that's dumb, basically. Well, because Russell Wilson hurt his calf doing a football thing, but not a football thing that quarterbacks do. But that created this, that this is like the old, I've brought up this on the show 4 or 5 times, like the old story about like, oh, that's good, and it fell in a haystack. Oh, but there was a pitchfork in it. That's bad. Oh, but it's back and forth because we never know until later on sometimes whether these things are good things or not. But the fact that Russell Wilson got hurt on that just completely changed the Steelers season. And I agree with you about Arthur Smith, like having trouble getting a read on him. Is he actually a good play caller?
Yes.
Does he actually add value?
He did so well in Tennessee. Then my thought was that like he just got addicted to winning that way. Where the classic guy where it has to be hard. There has to be a hand tied behind his back. And then even if you offered him a good quarterback, like, no, I can do it. I want to do it this way. I can do it this way. Not that he turned down good quarterbacks or whatever. But like, I was always one of my theories. He told the Falcons front office, like, you don't need to use a pick. You don't need to use capital on a quarterback.
Right.
I got this. I can figure this out. And he keeps ending up places in these exact same situations somehow. You're so thought provoking. 2 things, like, listen, some things become conventional wisdom and they shouldn't. But then modern life, we are very quick to discard like decades and oftentimes centuries of conventional wisdom. And, maybe the sled thing is ridiculous, but maybe your quarterback should be able to do the sled once without getting hurt.
Right.
And maybe that was more than just a sign. Maybe it was just like good common sense. Like, all right, Russ can't even do the sled. without getting hurt.
Yeah.
And maybe it wasn't even a miracle. Maybe it was just like actually common sense. Who
Right?
knows?
Like the football gods. You say, well, the football to pass through and become part of the team this year, you have to perform this ritual to please the football gods. And
Yes.
Russell Wilson failed. So Russell Wilson he's gonna have a great career as a host of like kids award shows and things like that, you know? And being a spokesperson. I mean, he's gonna be terrific.
Neutrogena.
Exactly.
I don't know. Somehow that just came to mind. I have no idea how. It seems like he could promote hair products.
Well, since another reason that Justin Fields, or being on the positive side of the Justin Fields projection going forward, makes sense is, boy, it looks like Caleb Williams doesn't have a lot around him. Boy, it looks like
yes,
all this best situation for number 1 overall pick is not actually a good situation. It still might be good for fantasy because the Bears can't run the ball, but if you're looking at who was at fault, if we're trying to assign comparative negligence here of Fields and the Bears organization, and there's some number that's not 0 by the Bears.
Yes, and the Caleb thing. So it's a classic. The hindsight, it became so clear. Like we ignored a lot of red flags. We're like, I was so focused on like all the cool fantasy players they added that I didn't focus on like, oh, maybe the number 9 overall pick should have been an offensive lineman for the rookie quarterback, because they already have like an alpha wide receiver. It's cool to have Roma Dunze, of course, but like maybe like making like luxury signings, like Cole Kmet is really good. You already paid Cole Kmet. Like, why are you signing Gerald Everett?
Right. Well, that Shane Waldron's going to dazzle us with his great scheme with Gerald Everett.
But so like the fantasy football moves, naturally I fell for them lock, stock, and barrel. Like, oh, this is amazing. This is gonna be so cool. Like Caleb, no one's ever had a setup like this. And then you see, oh, the reason he has this cool skill player setup is because no one can block.
Yeah.
And not that it's all the offensive line's fault, because defenses are going to test an offensive line when there's a rookie quarterback and do things they don't do against a veteran quarterback. But I will say with Caleb, as grim and bleak as it has been, as many like layup throws as I've seen him miss, I did feel like he got into rhythm with Rome Odunze in the first half last week. And then once he got into rhythm with Rome, it seemed like he got his whole game into rhythm.
Sure.
And even if he's still under siege, he was in rhythm with 3 guys by the end of the game. He had at least 3 guys, I think he had at least 6 catches. And he was having to throw and drop back way more than they wanted to, blah, blah, blah. But I do think maybe he's now completed Act 1, Phase 1 of his rookie season, where like the under siege phase could be ending because he's actually making some throws now and making defenses pay a little bit.
Yeah, I think for fantasy, he's going to be good. And look, one of the reasons, going back to Jayden Daniels or taking a chance on Justin Fields or Caleb Williams or any of these quarterbacks that are dual threat quarterbacks, is with scoring down, with it being more and more difficult to put together a decent fantasy lineup, or at least when you look back at the results, maybe you liked it going into Sunday, but then you look at the results, that quarterback position becomes so important, Pat. I don't know how you're going to win a championship without one of those quarterbacks that can drop a 30 or 35 in any given week, whenever now it's hard to scrape out 15 from your wide receiver or 15 from your running back because of the variance, the week-to-week variance. But I agree that Caleb Williams could be that guy. He and Dak Prescott are both set up where the team is just looking to them like, if please, can we try to win this week? It's up to you whether we win.
Yes. But, tough life there. But I was thinking to an earlier point, the defenses, I don't know if I entirely understand what's going on, but it took the defenses so long to adjust to the passing golden age that I think like offensive coordinators and like front offices just kind of started assuming the adjustment was never coming, or that that was the new equilibrium, that the pass actually could not be stopped, but it actually can be stopped still, apparently. And 2, maybe we just got so used. I don't think like we definitely took it for granted how much Hall of Fame level quarterback talent was playing at once. Where we chalked it up to, oh, this is just the era. Like things are just different, which of course partly was era, but it wasn't all the era. And it just turned out there was actually like 5 or 6 Hall of Famers playing at once.
Right.
And we got so spoiled and so used to things that seemed like they were going to be the new normal, and just we're not. Apparently.
Right. In that era, the golden era, the one we got to come up with football as analysts in, Pat, lucky us. Yeah, guys like Phillip Rivers and Tony Romo, who would be probably considered one of the best 2 or 3 quarterbacks in a lot of other eras, were kind of afterthoughts. I mean, they're the undercard.
They might not even make the Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Right. It was amazing. And especially the AFC bracket in the playoffs when it was Manning and Brady and
Man, oh
Roethlisberger,
man.
and one time Joe Flacco.
Yes.
And it's very much playing out that way again with Allen and Mahomes and Burrow. Although we'll see again, high level narrative stuff, and it may not matter for fantasy football in the end, but the Bengals and their thrifty ways,
I know, man.
it's creeping in. It's creeping in to, and it is affecting the game because it could help Joe Burrow in the end if they have to score 40 points to win. But again, how will he hold up? Will he be able to stay healthy? We'll see. So it's going to be interesting. Okay, I want to touch on a couple other actual substantive topics. I'll do this.
Sorry to sidetrack us again.
No, it's not. It's just because you can talk about a specific fantasy take and say what should fantasy players do and things like that. And for folks that like that kind of show, I mean, you must be new to this show. But what I love about this is every one of these, to formulate the take, whatever the take is, you have to appeal to some theory of football or some theory of the why of what we're watching unfold, and then taking a projection and say, what's the next thing going to be? And one of the ones that I feel like is a layup, but sometimes when I feel like it's a layup, not everybody out there is seeing the same thing. Another one I'm trying to get out ahead of right now is, and it's again about play callers. I feel like if this is what the Green Bay offense is with Malik Willis, Pat, what is it going to be with Jordan Love?
I would like to know, because you want to talk about like variables and moving parts. For Jordan Love, like, ran unsustainably hot last year. He looked amazing. He was genuinely great, of course, but like unsustainably high touchdown rate. Probably more efficient than he was going to be this year. Like, regardless of what happened, then he got hurt in week 1, of course, and it almost like the Packers accidentally bungled in. So like with CJ Stroud and the Texans, like
Yes.
all summer, my fear was like, this is too early of an anointing. Like, we fall in this trap all the time. We think like a guy has an amazing rookie season, like he can only be better as a sophomore, especially if they have all these weapons. But as we know, a lot of times it's not linear. They take detours along the way while they're progressing. And like, so we're seeing some of like what has happened with the Texans so far basically has not surprised me. Losing 34-7 surprised me. But like, I'm not surprised that CJ Stroud it hasn't come out and like been clearly like a top 5 fantasy quarterback, where the same thing could have maybe happened with the Packers. But then they got like this weird like view into an alternate life, thankfully for them, only for 2 weeks. Like, man, we can do this power running football, which we, of course, in large part because of the quarterback. But like, maybe they are going to reevaluate their offense. The run is going to be a much bigger part of their, especially now that the quarterback has a knee injury. He's healthy. He's going to play. But I'm assuming he's not at week 1 stamina levels, conditioning levels, and that they might have like fluked into what is a better approach for their team than that they were going to take.
That's fair.
And I have no idea. I mean, I'm truly making this up as I go along.
No, aren't we all? That's what I learned in law school. Every one of us can do that. You don't need a JD to do that, although you can make a lot of money if you're doing that with a JD. Yes, and I think that's an interesting possibility to probe, and it makes me, one of my favorite waiver wire pickups this week is Emmanuel Wilson. That's one of the guys that sometimes in the waiver wire pickup, you're trying to get one of the 2 or 3 hottest names, and you hope that you get one of those names and you're going to bid big. And sometimes you're actually hoping to sneak under the radar and get someone maybe for like 10% of your budget, because I want to be attached to this running game for sure. And Josh Jacobs is slowing down a little bit. And Emmanuel Wilson, what I liked about him on that screen pass, and how many times you see a screen pass score for like 30 yards out, but it's a perfectly executed screen pass. And I think that in this offense, if you're just executing the plays, I think Matt LaFleur has it dialed up at this point. But I do think that with Green Bay's offense, I don't know how people look at Christian Watson. He's healthy, and he still has the ability to get behind defenses and do what he did right before he got hurt last year. Jayden Reed, I mean, we've already seen what he can do with Jordan Love. And I think that this offense is being underestimated. But it is Minnesota. Go ahead.
No, I totally agree on Reed and Watson. So like, heading into the season, we're like, man, are there going to be 4 or maybe even 5 Packers pass catchers viable in 12-team leagues? Like, maybe we're not starting Dontavian Wicks.
Sure.
Like, he's on our bench in 12-team leagues. I think that is no longer happening, probably. But Reed, like, his role is just so clear what it should be in this offense. Christian Watson is still going to be like the game flipper, the matchup flipper,
Rashid Shaheed type,
yeah,
or Jameson Williams, or
even like prime era MVS.
Sure.
and like he's still the kind of guy who can flip matchups on like 2 or 3 catches.
Yes.
So I'm still very bullish on Reed and Watson. I did not want to like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm fading all the Packers pass
No,
catchers.
and I think, but I would imagine that because of how quiet they've been, they're probably, so you could do some sort of exercise where, and I know they're doing best ball drafts now, resurrection
They
of
are,
best ball.
which seems, no offense to my friends, I can't even imagine drafting right now.
No, well, that's because we've got to create content. We're content creators. I hate
True,
that term,
yeah.
but that's what we do. That's the deal that we made, so we can exist in 2024 America. But I like it because at least it gives us a sense of where people are in terms of player values. Now, it might surprise people, but I would imagine that Christian Watson and Jayden Reed, who were pretty modestly priced because of the uncertainty around the Packers pass offense, aren't significantly more expensive than they were in drafts, and maybe are less expensive than they were in drafts, even though the reveal, forget about the Jordan Love part, the reveal is Jayden Reed's going to be even better. And like you said, he's being used ideally. And Christian Watson, by all indications, knock on wood, is going to stay healthy and he can still do what he does. And then you have again, it's all about the play callers, right? We were talking about Clint Kubiak for 2 weeks. By the way, what about that one? Do you think that we're going to look back and look at the first 2 weeks as a blip, or is this still going to be an offense overall that overperforms?
I think it'll probably, on the whole, be an overperforming offense, but I guess it's just a high variance offense where Clint Kubiak, the way like he got on like every bandwagon that exists, basically. We got to do more play action, which not the play action's like some like new invention or new bandwagon, but play action, pre-snap motion. I think quarterback rollouts was another one they were really emphasizing. He got on every bandwagon that makes life easier for the quarterback, and so it's kind of stuff where you steal gains. You get easy gains against like unsophisticated defenses or just teams that are worse than you. But it turns out the Eagles is still Vic Fangio, even though their defense looked bad in weeks 1 and 2. And like Vic Fangio is like, all right, I'm not going to just give you like all this like easy stuff. And it's just gonna. I think that's gonna be high variance. But yeah, I can't believe that the 91 point thing was like a total fluke, and that there's gonna be some weeks where it's still just like the opposing defensive coordinator is just like, all right, I'm going to easily stop Derek Carr. But there are going to be a lot of weeks where they do not easily stop Derek Carr.
And
I'm still erring towards not fluke. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I would agree with that. I mean, I still think, I'll tell you, last week, someone asked me, should I trade Tyreek Hill for Chris Olave? And I was like, I think so. I think the answer is yes. Even though at that point, Chris Olave hadn't really even done anything. And Olave did something last week, but there was a lot more there if the Saints offense wasn't so predictable.
Yes.
Which is always
exactly.
And so again, what's fascinating to watch unfold as we're talking this stuff out, Pat, is that variance, the week-to-week variance. And some of the week-to-week variance can be just as simple as, again, the puppet masters, the coordinators, the play callers, the game planners, where, for one kind of defensive coordinator, the Clint Kubiak game plan is just going to make smoke come out of their ears. And the way that they've got their players ready psychologically, mentally, emotionally, like they're going to take the bait, they're going to like the Cowboys defense, but a different kind of defense. And of course the Cowboys defense is adjusting without Dan Quinn, but a different kind of defense. Like you said, Vic Fangio said, we're just not going to, we're going to play the run and we're not going to give you anything. We're just going to stand there and wait and we're going to,
I kind of just did that.
Yeah. They did. It was kind of like a stoic, like a more stoic Buddhist way of handling. Like all this stuff is happening before the snap. What's going on? What's going on? We're just going to play the run. And so depending on how the coordinators are approaching on both sides of the ball, because you mentioned Mike McDaniel, part of the reason to buy at the top of the show. Why are we buying Tyreek Hill? Because we believe that Mike McDaniel is going to use him as the most influential factor in this offense, going to go down swinging with him, which for fantasy is what we want. Again, we're psychoanalyzing these guys, but that's why you're going to see this incredible variance week to week, even though over the course of the year, again, if you drafted Jayden Daniels, because there's going to be a defensive coordinator who's seen some stuff with Jayden Daniels and be like, okay, I know how to frustrate him, right? I would think.
No, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah.
No. So we'll see. I mean, we'll continue to ride the variance roller coaster. Okay. One of the
By the way, tying that all together,
yeah.
We're going to see what we see from the Mike McDaniel Dolphins. I just realized with the Saints, where some weeks, like they truly, like depending on their plan, they just like can't be stopped. Like the defense players, like I don't know what to do, man. I'm sorry. Right. And like then other weeks, like, well, all right, I'm just going to easily stop this because I
Right.
know exactly what they're doing. And
Yes.
the Saints are probably a good comparison, of course, for the Mike McDaniel Dolphins.
Absolutely. And we'll see, we'll see if someone catches up to the Vikings, the way the Vikings
I know.
dismantled Houston, I
I'm
mean,
really, this is such an interesting week for the Vikings
oh
because
yeah.
game script has been so pristine so far for them. And he's still taken 7 sacks over the past 2 weeks, Sam Darnold.
Right.
So, like, if Sam Darnold gets into any trail mode whatsoever, there's going to be like old Sam Darnold, like, oh man, I'm under pressure. This sucks. Like, I'm going to get sacked 7 times now. Like, I am so looking forward to Packers Vikings.
Right. Or maybe Sam Darnold has put that behind him, right? Again, I know this is on the couch and I'm going way over the top with the whole concept here, but Sam Darnold and his psychological journey. And again, we're talking about
journey.
Right. And Justin Fields too, where you're talking about, was it the organization, right? I mean, how many times do we have to say that about Sam Darnold? One of the, I think the tells about Sam Darnold, Pat, was everybody in the league liked him. I forget who was that said this, but that wasn't new information when it got out there. Kyle Shanahan loved him, for instance. So they were thinking like, that's the Jets. I think among the league, if we could just hear them talk frankly for like an hour or two,
it'd be so amazing.
Well, there's just so much stuff would be confirmed, right? We'd be like, well, I knew that. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to finally know that.
Yeah.
I always say we're peeking through keyholes because the NFL is so tight about information and they're so tight about what information gets out is what they want to get out. And the real reasons why things go the way they go are not things that we can see, but they're things that we can intuit just based on following the sport every year. Go ahead.
No, I was just totally agreeing with that. And thinking about how interesting, and too, like, a lot of times, like, organizations get reputations for a reason. You mentioned earlier the Bengals being like miserly, basically, and being cheap, which is so hard to do in a league with revenue sharing and all that. And somehow they still manage to be super cheap. And then they get Joe Burrow, and it's like, all right, they're actually spending money now. They've actually signed a few free agents. They've actually extended a few guys. But then even that, I feel like now they're reverting to like the pre-Burrow ways in some ways. And like, I'm so fascinated too to see about Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers. Like, like the Chargers, like the ultimate, like they're just like, they're a poor franchise,
right?
Relatively speaking, compared to everyone else. And I feel like there's several probably institutional reasons why things always go sideways at the Chargers. And like, can even the Chargers mess up Jim Harbaugh? It's like a super fascinating experiment.
Oh yeah,
I'm interested to see.
Absolutely. And of course, that's what's funny is that it's this game that we love, Pat. We're close to off the rails, so whatever.
That's fine, yeah.
I mean, it is like we're in and hyper analyzing like a board game that billionaires play, basically.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. No, it's so true.
I mean, that's
I would love to hear what the billionaires say about the Spanos family.
Yeah, right. Well, in the Spanish, isn't that another one where the heirs are fighting, right?
Yes, they're all, man. I wish I loved anything as much as NFL heirs love fighting,
like the Bensons and so on. Yeah, I mean, it's all of these things that the stories of the owners too also infect
it bleeds into the personnel. Right. It's crazy, but it somehow does. It really does.
Right. So and you're talking about like influences, right? Dave Canales and his offensive wizardry, and Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton, you want to talk about a psychological profile of somebody who, again, at some point had to just not care what people were saying about him, just not care what people thought of him, because he was, for whatever reason, because for what Andy Dalton was dealt as a hand, he had about the best career you could have had if you were Andy Dalton as an NFL quarterback, right? And he's still there and he's still doing it. And I mean, Andy Dalton, I haven't projected, I think, in my top 10 quarterbacks for sure this week. Isn't it ironic too that it's coming against Cincinnati? But can Andy Dalton and Dave Canales basically, as they did last week, change the destiny of the franchise this year, or Dave Tepper and his ways, does it creep in? And of course, on the other side of that one was, another owner's son. And I think there's also every now and then the veil gets pulled back on this stuff, Pat, that it's about cash flow. Sometimes it's just about cash flow.
The Raiders are always rumored to be in cash flow hell.
Right?
Yeah, people always think it's the same. How is it not the same thing for all 32 teams? That's the same salary cap for all 32. I don't even understand how money matters in the NFL.
Right.
And it turns out some owners are just more cash poor.
Right, you have
And
to put signing bonuses in escrow or something, or if it's guaranteed, you have to put it in escrow. I don't know the exact. I'm sure there are a lot of really smart people that are listening to the show right now that are telling me they could
don't
probably
ask me
rattle
about
off
money.
in the bylaws exactly how it works under the salary cap. But that's part of the story. All of these stories are intersecting, and we're seeing where the rubber meets the road, these emergent realities that are so much different than anything we projected. Like there is going to be no good fantasy tight end this year. Okay. Are any of the good fantasy tight ends going to bounce back? Is there any? I mean, we'll leave Trey McBride out. He's going to be out with concussion. He was actually doing okay. So just Andrews, Kelsey, Kincaid, and Laporta. Would you? Is the answer none of the above? Is there some combination? I know you've done some multiple choice tests in your past, Pat. What circle are you filling in?
I guess I feel most confident in Laporta still, even though I was a little concerned because when so much of the success is about a narrow target tree, it's always like a huge shock to the system when a new variable gets introduced. And even if Jamison Williams is not competing for the same targets as Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown, if he's more efficient on his outside targets, it of course means fewer middle of the field targets. And JMO, had a down week 3 or whatever. And Laporta, now he's got the injury variable. Where I still think Laporta is going to get there, but let's be more where he was like steady Eddie last year. He's going to be like every other tight end now, where it's more like boom or bust. The other guys, it's like, so Denny Carter, is like telling me, he's like, man, Travis Kelce, like, he just like never even ran routes, but like he was just good enough and athletic enough before. And like maybe now he's just like lost a little too much where he just can't be like the freelancer guy.
Yeah.
And my theory too is now the defenses know the Chiefs are just going to take what they give them, and the Chiefs like aren't even going to bother trying to like force the issue down the field. That maybe that's finally working against them with like Kelce, and they're like, even if it's like going to be inefficient for them, they need to start taking these shots. I know they know all this, and Andy Reid knows all this, of course. But we're like, they should almost do, I feel like, empty sideline shots and deep shots just to like try to keep the defense honest. But Kelce just. A guy who lost 5 or 10% last year has probably just lost another 5 or 10%. Mm-hmm. Andrews is the really weird one because, like, I don't know like what the real Ravens offense is. I know it wasn't the offense we saw against the Cowboys where it's only 15 pass attempts or whatever. Right. But like the downfield passing, it's like still is not happening for them. So are they going to go all in on Derrick Henry in the run? And what that means from Mark Andrews, another guy who's probably lost at least 5 to 10% of his athleticism, of his burst, or whatever. Has he lost more? And Kincaid, I don't even know what to say about Kincaid. Like he's getting targeted a lot when he runs routes. He doesn't run many routes. Right. Like the Bills, they're all in. Now like Josh Allen literally saying like I like now that the guys just don't care if they get the ball, even though we know they care if they get the ball. And he's like I can just spread it around without fear of someone getting mad. And the signs do not seem positive for Dalton Kincaid. Like Josh Allen's like loving too much, just being the pitch and catch guy, like a true point guard this year.
Right.
Like he's just going to ride out this year. And like, if you're open, man, I'm throwing you the ball. If you're not, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. I think you laid out some good theories. I mean, I think perhaps the best one is because we've seen elite wide receivers age so well, maybe elite tight ends because it's such a physical position. I mean, even Tony Gonzalez aged pretty well, but maybe with
even
Kelce
like Jason Witten. Yeah. Like, but Kelce has like a different, Kelce's about freelancing. It's not just like, he's not adjusting to just being the guy like I'm catching a 6-yard pass and falling down.
No,
like I think he still wants to be like big play. Like I'm gonna find the seam in the defense 22 yards down the field.
Right.
He's not content to take his Jason Witten, or Tony Gonzalez games.
Right. It's the play that got called back when he was going to lateral it against the Bengals. He's just sitting and waiting for those. I mean, it turns every tight end. So you mentioned Kincaid and you mentioned Laporta. So they're George Kittle. We just didn't realize it. George Kittle from a fantasy perspective of when they're good, they're so good that when they're good or when the game asks them to be an important part of the game as a receiver, they will be tremendous and they will win your week for you, but they won't always be asked to do that. And with Kelce and Andrews, maybe we just underestimated the decline. And I do think, to the credit of fantasy football, the hive mind, Kelce and Andrews both seemed like their injury age discount was overpriced. It seemed like, wow, you're really splitting the difference, thinking these guys are going to drop off even more, and they were right. And unfortunately, with Andrews too, there was that mysterious car accident that again, we have to just say like, well, we'll take their word for it. But after the McCaffrey thing, I don't know how often people were going to take the word for it when players are on the back nine of their career. So Jake Ferguson for tight end 1 this year. Jake Ferguson.
I know. Jake, I love to see like a theory actually working. Or my theory on Jake Ferguson is like, listen, there's just no way this guy's not the number 2 weapon. Yep. And that the number 3 weapon, they might not even ever figure out who it is.
No.
So I'm just going to draft Jake Ferguson a lot.
Yeah, Jake Ferguson, man. I mean, really, if someone said, someone gave me an offer, I could trade Kelsey or I could trade Andrews for trade him for Ferguson, maybe even throw something in.
Totally agree.
And now we can turn, because it is almost October. We can talk, and I'm a Pirates fan. Did you see what the Pirates did to Rowdy Tellez, by the way?
I did, and that's going to play really well with the agents and the other players.
Yeah, cheap.
Talk about cheap. My God,
$200,000. That's couch cushion change if you're an owner of it. But you're a Cardinals fan, and the Cardinals seem like stuck in a cul-de-sac of their development as a team.
So the Cardinals, I think it's sorry, not that anyone wants my theory on the Cardinals, but I think it's pretty simple. Where they got too used to, they were one of the early adopters of analytics. They were used to being on the vanguard of the modern sabermetric movement. They got too used to being ahead of the curve that they did not notice as they not only fell back to the pack, but then started getting bypassed, surpassed.
Right.
And it took them like 2 or 3 years longer than it should have to realize this, and that they are finally realizing it. But like they got too comfortable being smarter than everyone else, and then to the point where they became dumber than everyone else. And it's very sad.
Well, and my second team is the Padres, and it was really fun to see them turn the triple play.
Unbelievable.
They've got a real chance because they actually haven't been healthy for most of the year, and they're going to get in. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to bloom them. But I'm glad that the Cardinals let Mike Schultz go, because it was clearly Bob Melvin the whole time. That was what was holding.
You want to talk about a local controversy? You want to talk about something that comes up quite literally still every day. Like, I don't listen to a ton of sports talk radio. Mike Schultz still comes up essentially every day when I do turn it on.
Well, I mean, what else is there? Like the Blues? I mean,
the Blues,
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they did finally get out. The Gloria, they got out. They broke out like a few years ago.
They did.
Finally got
We've moved on. Yeah, from the Gloria, though. But we're trying to talk about the MLS team. No offense to the MLS, though. But I mean, there's only so much juice to squeeze there.
Yeah. So I mean, would you say, like, how are you as much a baseball guy as you are a football guy?
Yes, and I think it's solely because of where I'm from. But like in St. Louis, the Cardinals are like imprinted on your heart at a very young age. The 1993 baseball season was my awakening. So baseball was always my primary because of the Cardinals, of course. But I'm like, a lot of guys in our field, they're so into football. It's like the only sport they ever think about, the only sport they ever follow. It's like all they can read about, all they can write about. Where I've always been, like, I'm watching the PGA Championship for now. I don't like bet, I don't gamble, I don't play golf. But like, I watch anything that's on my television for better. Like, I'm the kind of guy, NBC loves me. So the second the Olympics start, I never turn it off.
Oh yeah,
that kind of guy. And in any playoffs, I watch from beginning to end. And but it was always baseball in the NFL, so I ended up in the right spot because I get the NFL for my job, I get baseball for my love, and
absolutely.
And it was easier though when the Cardinals, just ran roughshod over the NL Central for 25 years, uninterrupted, essentially. But one thing I've learned about sports fandom, Sigmund, is I thought when the Cardinals, so we're in a lull finally. So they are in a lull finally. I'm like, maybe I'll care less, and maybe now I won't feel the need to watch every game. Or no, somehow it's like raise the stakes, because every day I'm like, this is the day that the winning streak is starting, and it somehow made me care even more now that they're not good, and I don't know what to do.
Well, I think some of it is that fandom is tied to, like you say, for a lot of us, it's where you grow up, it's memories, it's family, it's roots, and if you abandon the team in the bad times, my dad and I, may he rest in peace, Sigmund Bloom, would go see the Pirates in a different city every year. That was one of our traditions, like to get together and hang out. And now I feel like, now that he's not here on this plane with me, it's like that's something we shared, and it's a way to stay closer to him. And if you give up on your team when they suck, then what kind of fan really are you? Because that's what's really fun about, like, the Tigers right now.
Yes.
They weren't supposed to come together everybody had written them off, a month and a half ago. Their season was over, and now they just need to keep winning, and they're going to get to the playoffs, and then they have probably the best pitcher in baseball. So when you have the best pitcher in baseball and you get to the playoffs, anything can happen.
Yes, and I know all about. I will say I was acting like I've never rooted for a bad team. I think one reason why I can't abandon the Cardinals when they're not good is because I learned from the University of Missouri. Where all we ever know is pain, and so
Norm
too.
Stewart.
Yes, Norm Stewart is where I came of age. Norm Stewart, losing in every conceivable fashion as a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, as a 2 seed, being the underdog that's going to beat UCLA and then giving up a layup.
Tyus Edney, right? I was going to say that's the game,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Tyus Edney. And so Mizzou, I learned it's about the journey, and it's not just about winning. And the journey is, of course, just as important as the result. And I haven't had to do that nearly as much with the Cardinals, but now even the Cardinals, I get to do that. So
as a Cardinals fan, one of my good friends, someone near and dear to my heart, Tim Chamberlain, is he's from like Central Illinois, but he's below that meridian where you're either a Cardinals fan or a Cubs fan. He's a Cardinals fan, and really just the classic, like super knowledgeable baseball, super polite, so kind. Like it's like hey, I hope things are looking up for your team. Maybe Cardinals fans in general, and I think you also apply, are so polite and so kind that almost makes it more infuriating when they have the greatest comeback to win a World Series, like the most unlikely comeback ever, basically, to win a World Series. That Cardinals Rangers, I can just go back and watch that and still get goosebumps about how. And Freeze ended up on the Pirates after that. Yeah. So, I hope that people are okay with you and I just like geeking out. But this is the whole thing. Like men could just sit around and name players.
Yes,
like we could just sit around and talk about sports memories because it's an emotional resonance. And I'm speaking for myself only when I say this, but I have come to learn as I get older, as I am like completely emotionally illiterate. Probably because I'm a child of trauma and other things. I'm completely emotionally illiterate. I can't handle my own emotions. I can't identify them. I can't sometimes even attribute why am I feeling this way? It's something. Well, my name is Sigmund. We're here on the couch. It's something that happened to me like 40 years ago, right? It's my inner child saying, "You never listened to me." You never. But in the arena of sports, we're emotionally literate. Like we're getting in touch with our emotions. We're hugging each other. We're saying, "I love you." Yeah, we're letting feelings out in a way that is safe.
And people are tired of this cliche and ascribing like too much importance to sports. But like St. Louis too, like it goes so beyond sports. We're like, St. Louis, we're one of the downtrodden Midwestern cities. Like St. Louis has lost more than it's gained in the past 100 years. It's like the Cardinals, it is like a true civic pride thing. And then it's like when the Cardinals are good, like, man, are they even taking the Cardinals from us? Like, what could they take? Can they take the Mississippi River? And so like it goes so beyond sport in ways that are probably not always healthy, of course, or definitely not always rational. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't go beyond sports for me with the Cardinals. Like, say what you will about St. Louis, the Cardinals are the mighty St. Louis Cardinals, Sigmund.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
You can't take that away from me until you do take that away from me.
Right.
They're currently taking that away from me.
It's the same thing with Pittsburgh. It's the same thing, and especially because of the Pittsburgh diaspora and the way that so many people that grew up in Pittsburgh are scattered all around the country or the world. But it's about more than sports because it's peace. There's peace, when you're watching the game, setting your lineup.
Yes.
All that other stuff fades into the background. And it's shared experience, and there aren't that many shared experiences left. But I love that I get to share this hour with you, Pat, all of you folks out there that have allowed people like Pat and I that would have been, I don't want to speak for you, Pat, but I don't know where I would have fit in this society if I didn't have a job like fantasy football analyst. So thank you, everybody.
No idea.
Yeah,
absolutely no idea where I would be. Yeah, so thank you so much. Yes,
yes,
please.
And we share this experience as we go through the season and everything, all the ups and downs and setbacks and ways that we're so wrong and so right. But we do it together. We get closer. We enjoy it, and at least while this is going on, we can be together always. And we always want to be together with you because you're so classy.